If a building's burning, would we expect women to run in there to rescue? The expectation is that women should run out screaming, and nobody's going to say that you're a coward, because that's the true feminine. They're doing what they're supposed to do. By default, there is an expectation on men, and I think it's a rightful expectation that we have to act with honor. Do you really expect that feminine men are going to run into that building? I don't believe they will. The feminist movement definitely has some issues. And I don't know when it went from being pro-women to anti-men. That's dangerous, because now you're making men feel like we need to be feminine.
I think as a man, you should understand women in your life. You should understand the feminine energy. You should embrace that. 85% of the people who watch our shows do not subscribe us. So please hit the subscribe button, because the more you subscribe us, the bigger our channel gets. And the bigger our channel gets, we'll be able to get better guests for you and ask them really good questions to help you become a better leader. In today's episode, we've talked about how Indian education system doesn't train us or doesn't educate us to become really successful and really wealthy in the ecosystem which is there right now. Why it happened, how you and I can become wealthy, what are the thought processes that we need to build, what are the mental models we need to learn. That's what we have covered in today's episode with Ron Malhotra. He is an expert in wealth building, coaching, and helping you and me clear our thoughts and aligning ourselves towards all the goals that we have in our life. Please enjoy today's show. And if you feel that this podcast is really long, then check out our Raj Shamani clips and Raj Shamani shorts channel, because there we put everything in small clips which can help you become a better leader for tomorrow in just short amount of time. Enjoy today's show. Why are you doing what you're doing? And what makes you think that you're successful because of XYZ reason? Like, what are those reasons you think that
good question. Reasons? Perfect question. And I think that'll be the question on the mind of a lot of people. So good. All right. Do you want me to
go ahead.
going? Yeah.
Go ahead.
So just to give you some background, I was born in India, New Delhi, India. And we moved to Australia when I was very young. Like most Indians, I had a dream to be successful because we came from a middle-class family. We had financial problems. I saw that there was a lot of stress at home because of finances. So naturally, I was driven financially. I wanted to do well financially. But the only career path I knew was, get a degree and then get a corporate job and then work up the corporate ladder. And so I said, where can I learn about money? And first I started just packing bags at the supermarket. That's what I used to do.
Okay.
And as a young person, you can get jobs right from the age of 16. You can work, you can do that. But then once I turned 18, I got a job as a teller at a bank, cashier basically, counting cash. And I thought this was my in to try and get into the bank, but I was hopeless at counting cash.
Okay.
But then, because I was hopeless, and every day the manager would come in and she said, we can't balance the till. There's extra money in the till at times. What are you doing? So they got very frustrated. They had to stay back and help me. So they said, why don't you stand at the door and greet people? Just greet people for now. So I stood at the door, and that was not bankers. That's not what bankers did. But they didn't know what they were going to do with me. So I stood at the door and I started greeting people as people walked in. And I started to get into deep conversations. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had natural curiosity with people. So I started asking them questions. And I realized that there was people who were coming in quite frequently. And so I wanted to find out why they're coming in frequently, whether they're depositing money, how they're making money. And so I started to learn a lot. I started to gather information from people. And the branch that I was in, the banking branch, was in one of the top primary locations of Melbourne, which is called Collins Street. It's called the Paris end of Collins Street. So it's similar to the Wall Street in New York. And so people would walk in, and they were really high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals that were walking in. So I started to develop a curiosity. I started to develop a bit of a relationship. And then one day some guy walked in, some guy in a suit, and he said, what's your name? And I said, my name's this. And he said, would you like to be a financial advisor? And I thought, it's really weird because I'm broke. And like, how can somebody think that I can be a financial advisor? But, I was excited in the title. So I said, yes, I'd love to be. And he said, all right, And I think they thought that I had the gift of the gab. And back then, the financial services industry was not very well regulated. If you had the gift of the gab, it was all about selling financial products. It was actually not about giving good financial advice.
Okay. So whoever was like a good salesperson would probably get into it.
Correct. So that's what they saw. I didn't see myself as a salesperson, but they saw me as a great salesperson. They said, this guy is very good at building relationships and rapport. So they said to the manager, don't put him behind the counter. We will train him. So he took me under his wing. I went through some training. And I got the job of a financial advisor. I remember going to my father and I said, Dad, I'll become a financial advisor. And my dad said, but you're broke. So I was like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. I didn't care because I was so excited about the title, right? And I did that for 18 months, but I failed miserably because all that we were required to do was to sell financial products, sell insurance, sell investments, sell managed funds. And so I didn't think that that's what I was signing up for. So I decided to leave financial planning. I failed and I got into just banking. And then from there, I just worked my way up the corporate ladder. And by the time I was 31, I'd done extremely well. So I'm 45 now. And by the time I was 31, I was driving European cars. I was wearing expensive suits. I had the watches. I had the lifestyle. I'd bought a home. I actually bought a home at 19. So I was always very financially oriented that way. But the problem was one day I was coming home and I was always feeling aggressive. I was feeling agitated. I was feeling irritated. I was getting headaches. My immune system was not very good. On the weekends, I would go out and party hard and drink hard. And so something was wrong. I couldn't figure it out, but there was something wrong. Here I am. Everyone's like, you're really successful. You've got this private banking role. You're making an incredible amount of money. Even I thought I was successful, but deep down I felt like something was missing. And so I really think that from 31 up until now is when my journey has really started, where I started to reflect inwardly, started to ask myself some important questions. Who am I? What do I really want? I'm still very financially motivated, but I think there's been a bit of a change. Back then, it was just money was the main thing. Now it's like, how can I make money doing what I love, but also makes a positive contribution to humanity? So that's what's changed. Still financially motivated, but the means have changed.
And what made you think that, like, what was the reason for this change?
Or just the frustration coming home and having, and I knew that there was something else. Now, I do love learning about money and I love what I was doing in private banks. I liked the prestige and the status that went with it, but deep down, it didn't really fulfill me. And so I came across this model by Gay Hendricks, which is about your zone of genius.
Okay.
And it got me intrigued. I knew that financial advisory and wealth management was my zone of excellence. But I started to ask myself, is this also my zone of genius?
What is zone of genius?
Zone of genius is the zone which you are absolutely naturally brilliant at.
Okay.
Not to say that you don't need to develop that skill further, but you have very strong natural foundations. You have a very strong natural orientation. You have a gravitational pull towards certain endeavors. And if you just put a little bit of time and effort into it, you end up accelerating your success. And so I started to realize, and basically he makes the case that there are different zones. There's the zone of incompetence, all the things we're bad at. Zone of competence, things that we're reasonably good at. Zone of excellence, things that we're very good at. And zone of genius, things that we're actually geniuses at. And I started to realize, maybe there is some genius tapped into me. And is it in this space of wealth management or is it something else? And that's how, when I started to go through this exercise of doing personal development, I discovered that my actual zone of genius was teaching. And somebody, I can't remember who, but somebody did this exercise with me and they said, look, who are you by spirit, who are you by mind, and who are you by heart? And so after doing a lot of reflection on that, I realized by spirit, I'm a teacher. You might be an entrepreneur by spirit. I'm an entrepreneur by mind. It's not a natural thing for me. I've learned it. But I'm a teacher by spirit. It just comes to me naturally. My ability to think complex concepts, dissect them, present them in a way that can cause transformation, it just comes naturally to me. So I started to embrace that identity more. And then I thought, I need to do this more. But I wasn't going to make an impulsive decision and give up everything that I had built.
Okay.
So I said, let me do it on the side and see how that works. And then as I started to speak and I started to mentor, the response was incredible. And I thought, yes, it feels right. It feels really good. And now I was starting to lose interest in what I was doing on the wealth management and financial planning space, especially because I built my own business. And I thought, I'm going to make the transition, but I didn't know when to make the transition. So I said, let me build a business out of this because I want to monetize this. And so as we started to monetize it and we started to get repeated revenue, I made the transition and I said, that's all I'm going to do now. I'm going to focus on that. And so that's why I'm here. And obviously India was, we launched about 4.5 years ago. I had the vision. I said, what I'm teaching, I really strongly believe that this is incredibly transformational. I wish somebody had taught me this in school and university. I wish that somebody had taught me this in corporate. I never learned any of this. So I said, I'm pretty certain if people in the West don't know this stuff, people in India definitely don't know this stuff. So I started to look at the statistics in India. I was curious how many people are actually successful. Because every time I spoke to my family, I got the impression that everybody's making this crores and crores of money. All the news is people are all billionaires and millionaires. So I thought, what? I'm a good researcher. Let me look at actually what's happening in India. So I researched the trends. How many billionaires in India? It's about 190 at the moment, out of 1.4 billion people. How many millionaires in India? It's about 7.7 lakhs. If you actually convert 7.7 lakhs, you divide that by 1.4 billion people, it's 0.55%. So 0.5% of the Indian population are millionaires. But I'm hearing about all these stories that everybody's got a unicorn, everybody's got this tech startup, everyone's got this massive funding from venture capitalists. I'm constantly hearing this. And I really hear it from India than any other country, right? So I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I started to investigate how many people have a net worth of over 100 crores in India. And it's about 23,000 people. Again, if you break it down in percentage terms, it's 0.0016%. So I'm thinking, how come so many Indians have this dream, the probability of which is 0.0116%, and they're not going to get there? For the vast majority, this dream is not going to materialize. Like, I know that you're a guy who's built an exceptional business, but you are definitely a minority of people, right? And so I started to realize that there is a whole gap here in people's understanding. And so I started to think, when I started to develop my programs and my educational courses, I actually had the young Indian professional in mind. I started to put myself in their shoes going, what is their blind zone? What is their ignorance zone? What is it that they believe that's erroneous? What do they really need to know to complement what they've been educated on? And so that's how we started to become really passionate about bringing our programs to India.
Interesting. I have so many questions on this now. Okay. First is, you said an average young professional, right? They have their blind zones. What do you think? What are the blind zone of an average person who's watching this right now? Because I believe my audience is a reflection of me. Most of are going to be as ambitious as I am, probably in the same age where I am, right? So I want to know, like, what are our blind zones? And I want to take this liberty to call everybody as just, and I want to put it in one lens and one frame.
Yeah. And that's a great question, because I could be making this bold statement and not be able to substantiate it. I guess what gave me the confidence to realize that a lot of professionals have this blind zone, the number one reason was I realized that despite my career and commercial and financial success, I had these blind spots. And so that was the first starting point. But then as I started to talk to people, I started to realize that the vast majority of people cannot tell me what their goals are, what their values are, what their mission is, what their passion is, what their purpose is, what their strengths are. So I started to realize that from a self-discovery point of view, a lot of people actually don't know who they are. They've got an external identity, like everybody knows their name and their nationality, and everybody knows their religion, everybody knows their age, but that's external, right? That's something that society has given you. The internal identity, which is a concept that I talk about, who are you on the inside? Like, what is your purpose? What is your passion? What are your values? What are your strengths? What's your zone of genius? I started to realize that majority of people didn't know that. And that's one of the reasons I believe that a lot of people are not inspired and they don't really connect with what they're doing, because they're following what is trendy or what is lucrative at any given point in time. I'm going to become an engineer. I'm going to be an MBA, whatever it is. I'm only doing it because everybody else is doing it. That's the in thing. And that's what's going to make me successful. Second thing I realized was that the vast majority of people, that's not just Indians, but everybody, majority of people don't understand money. They don't actually understand the basics of money management. They don't understand investing. They don't understand risk management. They don't know how to protect wealth. The statistics are glaringly obvious. And that's not just in India. I mean, if you look at the Global Shift in Wealth, which is an annual report, I think it's produced by Deloitte. And that tells you that the number of millionaires in the world is less than 50 million. So that's out of 8 billion people. Now, a millionaire is not even a big deal anymore, as you would know right now. I mean, what's the big deal about making $1 million? Like keeping $1 million, right? I also realized that a lot of people don't understand the difference between income and net worth, or they don't understand how to minimize their tax, or they have erroneous money beliefs. So I started to realize there was massive gaps in the money area. And whether we like it or not, we are in an economic world, and money is a great enabler. And because I did financial advice for many, many years, and I don't say this with any disrespect, so many of my clients were CFOs and vice presidents and doctors. Finances were in shambles. Some of them, when you looked at how much money they had accumulated over an entire lifetime, it didn't make sense because their income at the front end was massive, but what they kept was incredibly low relative to that. So I started thinking, is it possible perhaps that our education system is not teaching professionals the basics of money management? And I started using this analogy about cricket. So imagine you're a fantastic cricketer, but you don't know the rules of cricket and you don't know how to read the scoreboard. What is the possibility that you're going to be successful as a cricketer? Even if you're a great batsman or a great bowler. Think about that, right? So the majority of people don't know how to read the financial scoreboard. They actually don't know what their net worth is. And they don't know the rules of money. There are certain rules of money, right? How the game is played. So then I thought to myself, well, if you don't understand the rules of money and you don't know how to read the scoreboard, which means you have no idea how you're traveling financially, you're probably assuming that you're doing well financially because you have a good salary or you drive a good car. Do you have any idea how you're traveling relative to your own needs in the future, right? And I started to realize, my God, that's a huge blind spot. Like people are in the money game by virtue of the fact that you've got an income, you've got expenses, you're paying taxes. You're in the money game and you don't know how to read the scoreboard and you don't understand the rules of the game. So mathematically, it's a certainty that you're going to fail. And again, the statistics reflect that. Global statistics are telling us that the vast majority of people, even in Australia, 72% of Australians will rely on social security at retirement, 72%. And America has 50 million people under the poverty line. So this is a global problem, right? And because I'm in the money game, I have a real passion for going, why does this problem exist? And how do we solve this problem, right? And so there was a huge blind spot. People don't even know that they're heading towards the financial disaster. They have no idea that they've got financial problems, right? So that was the second one. The third one was from a spirituality angle. How come the vast majority of professionals are choosing to follow an established career path rather than being creative, rather than being disruptive, rather than innovating, rather than discovering? Why aren't they being leaders? How come the majority are choosing to follow an established path, but they're not leading? And especially in today's online world, you have the ability to take your ideas and bring something to life, right? You have done it, I have done it. None of us are real geniuses, but we had the ability to think openly and independently, right? So that was another blind spot. I was like, why do people not understand their creative potential? Don't they understand how incredibly powerful they are? Don't they understand how they can maximize their potential? So I always say that, when you start education, if you look at the education system right now, you have primary education, you have secondary education, then you have, it's all academic. Then you have professional education, skills-based education. And for majority of people, that's it. But then you have personal development education. You have business education, financial education, spiritual education, right? And I realized that there was a big blind spot. A lot of people don't actually understand their spiritual nature. They don't understand their creative potential. They don't know how to maximize their potential because they don't understand how powerful they are. So I felt that was another blind spot. So those three were the main blind spots. And that's how, I said, how can I do something in order to not to discard the education system, but to complement it? Because it seems like the education system doesn't seem to have an interest in fixing these problems. According to the World Health Organization, mental illness is the leading cause of disability right now. According to Gallup poll, 76% of people hate their jobs. Majority of people have health issues, relationship issues, money issues. What's going on? We have more education than ever before. And we seem to still have those systemic issues in the human world, and we haven't been able to fix it. And so I felt that the primary cause was the way the education system is constructed. And I didn't see any solution out there, so I decided to do something about it.
You said that one of the first blind spots which people have is on their internal identity, right? Most of the people don't know about what's their passion, what's their purpose, what are they good at, what are they bad at, what is their zone of genius, what should they pursue, right? I believe sometimes it's okay not to know that. Because as when you're starting, okay, just think about a young person who's in his 20s, getting out. I believe it's okay not to have a purpose. It's okay not to understand weaknesses and strengths in that point. Because if I'm 20 and I don't know, naturally, I'm not inclined towards something and making it big, and I'm not forced by my internal source of motivation or external source of motivation anyway, or my family pressure. If I'm not forced to do certain thing, I should have the ability to experiment multiple things. I should not put this jacket on my head and be like, hey, this is my purpose and I'm going to change the world in this way. It's okay. Maybe I want to be a teacher, so let me try teaching, and it might turn out that it's not my purpose. Maybe I want to be a DJ, let me do that. Maybe I want to be a singer, let me do that. I mean, it can be anything. If you are forcing yourself to think about these questions from day one, that I need to figure out my purpose, then I think sometimes it can be bad as well. It can be detrimental, because internally you're not strong enough. You have not developed your personality enough that you can actually analyze between influence and the real source of inspiration. So you're forcing yourself to do something. And to me, that's a worse situation than actually not having a purpose. So what do you think about that?
I agree with what you're saying, because it can be restrictive. If somebody says, I need to figure out my purpose before I do anything, then that's not what we're advocating. What we are saying, though, is if you know who you are and you know what you want, you have a higher probability of achieving it, right? If you know who you are. So we say, it's, and here's the studies, if you look at value system, you are more likely to be disciplined, organized, and motivated in areas that align with your primary values.
Yeah.
We know that a lot of people, in their own admission, have problems with motivation and discipline and organization. Why is that? Because they've pursued a path that is not in alignment with their purpose and values, right? So it's not a necessity, but it's all about efficiency. I mean, you and I are entrepreneurs, right? Why? You want to be as efficient as possible. We understand that the world is not perfect, life is not perfect. But if you have a slightly more efficient path to achieving that success that you've dreamt about, then it's worth at least considering, right?
God.
Doesn't have to be forced. I mean, absolutely, I don't think that people should just sit there at home going, well, I don't know what my purpose is, I shouldn't do anything. A lot of the times, the way you figure out your purpose is through experimentation.
Yeah.
But it pays to kind of reflect on, as a child, what was unique about you? As a child, what were the things where you were involved in certain activities, you lost all concept of time and space? What are the things that you absolutely love talking about? What are the things where nobody has to push you? You naturally want to do them. What are the things where you have a natural inclination to do research? I think these are great questions to reflect on. And I certainly believe that if you choose a career path, an occupation that is in alignment with your purpose and values, you are likely to succeed more, because it's not going to feel like a chore. You're not going to feel like it's forced. And you're going to start to find joy in your work.
So there are 2 tests that I do for myself, and which has helped me a lot in my life. And I keep telling to everybody to start doing these kind of tests. One is how do I make more money? That's a test which I do. And then the other is, how do I find my purpose? And for both of them, I have a different test. So how do you make more money? Everybody keeps searching about what's the next big opportunity. How do I find trends which are really big? Okay. What are the people doing? Where have they made money? And I think the better way to do it is make a strength and weaknesses chart every night before you go to bed. So there's a wall, or take a piece of paper, write down plus and write down minus. Write down all the things which you feel that you did really good today. And then write down minus, which you feel it drained your energy, it sucked your energy, you didn't like it, you were terrible at it. Just write it down and do this for a month. And you'll automatically find out in those 30 days, you'll find out a pattern that, these are the 5 things which I really enjoy. And then you need to just put it up and take those strengths and turn around something in that field, or use that strength or that internal thing to build something which you really want to build. Because when you keep focusing on what your strengths are and what you really enjoy, you're going to automatically make more money than actually looking at more trends outside. So that's a test which I do, plus and minus. Every night I used to do that. And then eventually I found out, this is what I like, this is what I like, this is what I'm good at. And I want to get really good at these things. So let me do that. And I started enjoying the whole process. So that was one. And the second was, how do I find my purpose? Was the give index and the take index. I would write the same thing. I would, on a piece of paper, I would write give and take. Okay. What am I taking today and what am I giving today? Right. So for longest time, for 30, 40 days, I didn't have anything that I'm giving back. I always had this, oh, I'm taking food, I'm taking this, I'm taking, let's say somebody's time, I'm taking the money from this person, I'm living on this thing, right? I'm just doing that. And then I started doing, okay, today I taught my younger brother this. Oh, that's a give. Today I created content for the world for free. That's a give. Today I spoke to my mom just to strengthen a relationship. That's a give, right? So I would just give and take, and I would do that. And then when you do that for a long time, 30, 40 days, you'll find out what are the things that you love giving. And based on that, you can find your purpose. That, oh, I love solving other people's problem. Let me make that my purpose. So my strength areas are, I love talking. I love teaching. I love spending time in consumer goods and building brands. And I love solving people's problems. How can I combine both of them and actually turn it into a mission which will eventually help me? So this is what I used to do.
Yeah.
And it helps in the beginning. I mean, obviously later it's a huge journey, and I'm also on a journey that I've eventually not figured out everything myself. But I think it's a great starting point for everybody to follow these two indexes.
100%. I completely endorse that perspective as well. And that's why, you look at your own situation. To get to where you are, could you have got to where you are if it wasn't completely in alignment with your values and strengths? Mm-hmm. So I really do believe that the success journey accelerates fast. It's about whether you want to take the slow road to wealth, to success, or you want to take the fast road to success, right? So none of this is mandatory, but I do believe that it's got a lot of merit. Mm-hmm. I've personally experienced it. People who taught me have experienced it. We've heard that lots of great successful people also attest to these principles working. So I think there's merit in it. Now, obviously, I don't really want people to fall romantically in love with the notion of running after your passion. I mean, there are some practical realities as well. You've got to solve somebody's problem, as you said. And that's the business reality of it. If you're going to monetize your passion, you want to solve somebody's problem. So there is that strategic element as well. So we are very mindful of the fact that we don't just want to encourage people to just blindly fall in love with their passion. At the end of the day, there has to be an element of contribution and impact and solving somebody's problem as well. But I think there was a model that talked about the fact that where your purpose and your passion comes together to solve somebody's problem for a profit, that is the sweet spot of career fulfillment.
On that point, you said we've been... So external forces of society are conditioning us in a certain way. Education is not, education is not enough for us to live a great life or actually fast track our journey to...
Academic and professional education is not enough.
Academic and professional life, professional education is not enough for us to fast track our journey to wealth, right? And you said something very controversial as well, like education is indoctrinating us. Why would you say that?
I looked at the education system that prevails in most parts of the world, schools and universities. I looked at the curriculum, and going from being a struggling, broke individual to having the life and lifestyle that I want, I did an assessment and an evaluation of all the skills that I needed to get to this point. Mm-hmm. And then I reflected on the fact, how many of those skills did I learn whilst I was being institutionally trained? And I came to the conclusion that none of them were covered through the institutional education. Now, so obviously you can think from my perspective, I'm becoming skeptical at that point. I'm thinking, is this by design? How did they get it so wrong? Let me give you an example of this. I attribute my current level of achievement, productivity, my level of influence, my level of financial net worth to a range of skills, starting with critical thinking, my ability to take a piece of information and evaluate the truth in it. Decision making, my ability to be able to make decisions promptly and to correct my decisions. Risk management, my ability to manage risk. There's risk inherent in every aspect of life. My understanding of human psychology. How do I think? How do I process my thoughts? How do I manage my emotions? Money management, my ability to manage my cash flow, both in my personal life and my business life. My ability to multiply money, investing. I look at my ability to market and sell myself, which is a critical business skill. Even as a professional, even if you end up setting up a law practice or a medical practice, or maybe set up an architecture practice or a financial planning practice, you still need to know how to market and sell yourself. My understanding of branding, persuasion, communication, selling, all the skills that I've just mentioned, and there's a lot more, negotiation, none of them were taught in schools and universities. And it kind of makes you think, forget about all the financial skills. What about my true understanding of my spirituality, my energy system, my ability to create, how powerful we are as human beings? How come every single skill that has made me the powerful individual that I am, and I don't say powerful in terms of having power over other people, but I'm in control of my life and where I'm going. So that makes me feel powerful. How come every single skill that has contributed to me becoming the individual that I am, how come this was not taught to me my entire first half of my life, right? And so at least we have to ask the question. I'm not here to just criticize the education system for the sake of being controversial, but I think we need to at least start asking questions. Because the thing is, how come an individual knows the capital of Angola or the difference between bacteria and amoeba, but they can't tell you what their own values are, right? How come they don't know anything about managing their own money? How come they don't understand how the debt system works or the tax system works? How come? I mean, those skills are so incredibly important. And you also see a lot of professionals, they don't know how to manage their health, nutrition. They don't know how to manage their mental health. So we've at least got to ask the question. You see, the first response is people get resistant when I say this. I understand that. But again, that's an example of not having an objective view. You can't allow your emotions to get in the way. You see, the way you're going to fix a problem is by objectively assessing it. I'm not saying I'm better because I figured this out, but I figured this out because I was prepared to ask the questions. And that came at a cost, deep discomfort. So I'm just asking the questions here. I'm not saying that I have all the solutions here, but the reality is until we understand the problem, the cause of the problem and the impact of the problem, we can't necessarily come up with the right solution. There is a problem. A very small percentage of human beings on the planet are leaders, are innovators, disruptors, creators, inventors, discoverers. A very small percentage of human beings in the world are healthy and fit and radiating with vitality. A very small percentage of human beings right now have meaningful relationships or influence and impact. A very small make a contribution. A very small are wealthy and can take care of themselves and their families for their entire financial lifetimes. These are facts. This is not me making this up. There are plenty of statistics that will back this up. I'm just interested in going, hang on, as human beings, we've had plenty of time to figure this out. We have gone beyond the Industrial Revolution, the information age. Here we are in the social/digital artificial intelligence stage, and we still don't know how to manage our emotions. We still don't know how to manage our money. We still don't know how to manage our careers. Like, that's something that we have to talk about that. It's not, and if somebody was to say to me, but Ron, you're exaggerating this truth, I would say to them, why don't you just go up to your family members and every person that you've ever known in your life and ask them, what is your net worth? Ask them, what is your purpose? Ask them what their values are. Just ask them these questions. And you will see that they're going to be lost for responses. They don't have clarity on these things. And these things have a direct bearing on the quality of our lives. How can we not know this? So I just question the system that, I'm not saying that we need to eradicate everything that we're learning in schools and universities, but can we complement that perhaps? Can we spend a couple of years teaching kids? I've seen so many professionals that they don't have the confidence to negotiate in boardrooms. They don't know how to consult. They don't know how to present information. How come? I mean, we had 15, 20, 30 years in institutions, and people are still not equipped with the right knowledge that will give them the confidence to be able to guide their lives and lifestyles the way they want. A question has to be brought up.
There's a slight nuance on this. I don't think education system is bad or it's designed in a way that's not teaching us the way things. I think the way it's taught is difficult. So, and here's what I'll back it up with this. All the things that you talked about, they kind of tell us in school. We don't learn it because they don't teach us why it is important. So creative writing and expression, we learn that in our English classes from day one. We learn how to write essays, we learn how to write notices, we learn every little thing. We read about history, we read about power, we read about negotiation of two big leaders at the time when there was like wars, right? We read about all these things, but nobody actually zoomed out at that point and taught us, hey, this is what is called negotiation. This is what they're talking about values. In English classes, I remember they would teach you about Brutus Caesar, right? They'll talk about values. They talk about brotherhood. They'll talk about camaraderie. But nobody would actually tell us why this is important and how it's affecting my life. And whether it's maths, talking about commerce, right? I'm from that background. They taught us about the taxation system. They taught us about, and in school, I'm not even talking about college. They taught us about balance sheet, about finding our own net worth. They never taught us that it's important for us to apply it in our own lives. They always taught us that, hey, this is important to pass your exams. So I don't think the education system is the problem. I feel the way we have been taught is the problem. The way that nobody is telling us why what we're reading is important or why what we're understanding is important. I think everybody has just made it a thing that, hey, you need to read this, you need to learn this because you need to pass an exam. If we can just backtrack from that and zoom out and actually pinpoint on all the things that you said, I think we learn things. There are assignments that we have to present in school and give presentations. That's where the presentation skill comes in the picture. There are times where you have to become the leader and the monitor in the school and lead the whole class. You are being presented by opportunities every time in every class, every year on so many different things. It's just they never tell us about the importance of it in a way that they should. So, and obviously apart from that, there are 10,000 things which they need to add in the curriculum because now that we understand it, but I don't think that it's completely bad, like the way all of us have been thinking about education system.
No, I agree. I would never make the claim that it's completely bad. I see the merits of the education system in sticking to a curriculum. It teaches us commitment. It teaches us teamwork. I think the education system has played a pivotal role in getting people, especially in the developing world, from poverty to survival. So we have to acknowledge that. Has it got people from survival to success or from success to significance? That's where it falls short. So it's not about attacking it, but it's also not about blindly defending it either. It's about saying, okay, is there scope to potentially improvise it? There is a school of thought, and you might dismiss this as a conspiracy theory, but there is a school of thought that would also argue that the origins of the education system was to provide workers for the governments and corporations.
Yeah.
Now, that's a controversial subject in itself, but the reality is the way we deliver education and the curriculum seem to be very outdated and seem to be more suited for the Industrial Revolution. I did an MBA degree. What did it teach me about entrepreneurship, right? I think it was training me for corporate management. I don't think it was training me to start a building from the ground up. So there are questions that I have about this, right? Now, I certainly don't want to have an extreme view on this, but I have skepticism around the fact that, if the education system has more merits than demerits, then we should have at least more than 50% of people inspired, living a meaningful life, being financially abundant. And in every area, you see people that don't do well. But the percentages are so damn low of people who are living that type of life. In their own admission, but people will tell you, when I talk about success, one of the objection that comes up is, but Ron, isn't success different for different people? Isn't it a subjective concept? And I agree with that. Yes, it's subjective. However, there is a universal definition of success, an individual's ability to get what they want out of life.
Yeah.
Now, if between you and I, you are making a series of decisions where you can get what you want out of life, that means you know what you want, plus you have the ability to figure out how to get it. And let's just say you are living your life where 80% of your time you're doing what you want. And I'm making the types of decisions where only 20% of the times I'm able to live the life that I want. Regardless of what we want, it can be argued that Raj is way more successful than Ron because number one, he's figured out what he wants. Number two, he has aligned his decisions in such a way that he's been able to get those things in his life. He's been able to design the life and lifestyle that he truly wants. So I think that argument stands, that the individual who is able to work out what they want and they know how to get that out of life, that individual is smart. I mean, what is the ultimate test of intelligence at the end of the day? I would argue it is an individual's ability to get what they want out of life. If you can get what you want out of life, you're pretty damn smart. Because if you really look at, how some high achieving individuals become successful, it's not one or two decisions. It's a series of good decisions. They have made more good decisions than bad decisions. But that doesn't just happen. It's not luck. It's not destiny. It requires skill. It requires an evaluation of situation. It requires the ability to understand and manage risk. It requires the ability to make decisions. So I think the question is, why is it that only a small percentage of human beings are able to do that? So what is the real purpose of education if, number one, it's not going to allow individuals to be able to do that? But secondly, here is another thing I found. I found that there seems to be a positive correlation between how many years you spend in institutions and how close-minded you become. I know, again, it's a controversial view. I get that. But it's very difficult to get professional people to open their minds to a view that contradicts their current worldview. I find in many cases, based on my observational experiences, it's easier to get somebody who is ignorant to open their mind as long as they're hungry for knowledge. But once you believe you have knowledge, you're more likely to resist any new information that contradicts your worldview. So then that's another issue that I have with the education system, is that it's not really producing open-mindedness. It's producing more closed-mindedness. This is how we've always done things. This is how we're always going to do things. And if you come and challenge us, I don't like the way it makes me feel. So I'm going to reject you. Even if it's the truth, I'm going to prioritize my feelings over facts. Now, to me, I would argue that kind of response is indicative of low emotional intelligence. And now studies are showing that high emotional intelligence actually corresponds more to career success than IQ alone, right?
For sure.
So I've seen that personally. I've tested this, I've tested that anytime I share a piece of information with my professional network that is a bit out of the ordinary, that is not something that's known and accepted in the mainstream, I don't find that curiosity. I don't find this, I want to at least know this before I dismiss it. No, I'm going to dismiss it because I'm happy with what I've got, right? I don't want to even look at it. And we do get, and I'll tell you these types of responses. I have tested this. One of the best ways that I experiment on human behavior is through social media. When I put a piece of content, I see how people respond to it. And the more the content challenges a particular worldview, the more I see emotional outbursts around it, right? I don't see curiosity. I don't see, Ron, I'd like to know more, but, I think that this doesn't sound accurate to me or doesn't sound right to me. Can you explain? No, that's immediately they're going for an attack. And so why does that happen? Why are they so hell-bent upon defending a particular worldview and they're not open to anything else? And so I do think that that's another issue with the education system. I think in many cases, not in every case, in many cases it produces that closed-mindedness. I get a lot of people saying, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. Right, but it's okay for everybody to get a degree and get a job. And you were not concerned about the oversupply of degree holders. But all of a sudden, when I talk about entrepreneurship, you seem to be concerned about the oversupply of entrepreneurship. If you talk about health, you'll never hear anybody say, but health is not everything. If you talk about family, people will never say family is not everything. Talk about money, and what do people say? Money is not everything. What is that? That's a way of defending something, right? What are you being defensive about exactly? So I find, and because of what I'm talking about, money has to be one of the most controversial issues in the world. I understand it's a trigger point for a lot of people. I understand that a lot of people feel uncomfortable with the topic of money. That's fine. But if you're a really open-minded person, you're not going to shut off the conversation or the debate because it makes you feel uncomfortable. You'll demonstrate curiosity. And that's one of the things I'm also finding, especially in the professional domain. It's been a bit of a shock to me that it's the professionals that seem to be more close-minded than people who haven't got that level of education. And let's just talk about the behaviors. You're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. What are we really rewarded for? Individual expression. Individual expression is discouraged in the education system. Collaboration. In the education system, collaboration is called cheating, right? You think about it, right? Standing out, you're seen as a troublemaker in the education system. Conformity is definitely discouraged in entrepreneurship. Conformity is encouraged. Independence is encouraged in entrepreneurship. Dependence is encouraged in the education system. There are many reasons why I'm skeptical, right? And so, come on. I mean, India has a lot of problems right now. Where are all the entrepreneurs that are solving the problems? There are hundreds of millions of people going through the system. How many of them are coming out and solving the problems? How many of them are chasing just salaries and positions versus going, I have a vision and I have the confidence and the skills to bring that vision to life? Why are more people not doing that? Because they don't have the confidence and they don't have the clarity. But isn't that the purpose of the education system?
What do you think? Like, how can you make more people think openly?
I think the only way is you have to challenge the existing worldview. I mean, you can't, you have to shatter the existing worldview. Pardon?
But they start hating you then.
I know, and that's okay. I mean, Plato said that no one's hated more than the one who speaks the truth. I always say to people, if you don't like a piece of information, try and look for the truth in it. And if you love a piece of information, try and look for the lie in it. Right?
Nice.
Because not everything that we hear that makes us feel good is good for us. I mean, if you look at, I'll give you some examples of this, right? Pornhub. They get something like 100,000 hits per second. It's popular. People like it. Is it good for people? No. Some of the most profitable companies in the world are junk food companies or tobacco companies. People love it. Is that good for them? No. So we have to look at those things as well. Our love for something or our attraction to something is not a gauge of what is good for us. And so there is a case for, sometimes in most cases, the truth is not something what we want to hear because it shatters our belief system. It causes deep irritation in the mind. But that's what I'm saying. Emotional intelligence means to separate the facts from the person. If you hate me for speaking the truth, you are now even proving more that you're indoctrinated to the point that you cannot separate your feelings from facts, which is an indicator of low emotional intelligence. And low emotional intelligence is synonymous with indoctrination, right? So you have to learn this because it's not for me. I'm not trying to be right here. I'm trying to get people to the next level of evolution. That's all I'm trying to do. I feel like that's my mission. And but we can't do that if we maintain the existing worldview. There is no space for the new worldview to come in. And you've really got to decide at the end of the day. It's not up to me. I'm not going to force this on anybody. But I will say, you can defend any worldview you want, but be careful. Have you evaluated whether this worldview is supporting you and enabling you, or is it disabling you and disempowering you? Have you at least evaluated that? Right? Go ahead. Defend whatever you want to defend. But if it's not working for you, and you're still defending it, that shows that you're prioritizing your feelings over facts, or at least demonstrate that you're curious enough to know whether this is true. Forget about the fact that you don't have to accept anything that I'm saying as the truth. But are you prepared to at least experiment with it to find out? Or do you have no curiosity? Right? Because indoctrination leads to diminished curiosity.
I agree with you on this point. I believe anybody, okay, and I say this anybody, I want to take the liberty of being a little loose here, but correct me, okay? Anybody who's gotten to some level of success in their life, at some point they were irrational optimists. They're not logical.
I agree.
That they had this belief, they had this faith, they were irrational about their approach, they were irrational and imaginative about the future they have, and they want to build it. They're just optimists. They're like, I know that मेरे साथ सब अच्छा ही होगा. I know that ये बनना ही बनना है. Obviously, at some point, they were calculative in certain nature, but majority of the decisions were taken because they had belief, they had faith, they were spiritually aligned, or maybe they were just irrational optimists, if that's the word you want to call them. I
agree. I think irrational self-belief is definitely a prerequisite to success. The realist or the intellectual would say it's not realistic.
Yeah.
But whether the individual who has irrational self-belief realizes it or not, but they're actually being spiritual at that moment. A case in point, and this is going to really disturb a lot of people, Donald Trump. Most people would argue that he's a low vibrational human being. A lot of people don't like Donald Trump. They might say he is corrupt, or he is selfish, or he's narcissistic. We hear that all the time, right? But let's just for a moment put our emotions aside. Examine the man who has been able to materialize and manifest absolutely everything that he wants in his life. From marrying the most beautiful women to doing billion-dollar developments, increasing his net worth, and even becoming the most powerful man in the United States without having a background in politics. Let's ask ourselves why. Guy's got irrational self-belief. He's got faith.
I'm an emotional person. Okay. And the way you said it, like you don't let your emotions drive your decisions. I have seen and noticed and observed that in a lot of situations, my emotions drive my decisions and they've overpowered me. And I'm trying to understand, manage, and get more intelligent. And I've not reached there yet. But I'm on my own journey and eventually I'll be there, because for the longest time, I used to repel emotions. And I used to feel cool that, hey, you know what? I'm against having emotions. That this, when you're growing up and you see this American series where like everybody's super powerful,
cold and cool and stoic, right?
So I used to watch this series called Suits.
Yep.
Harvey Specter. And there's a famous line by Harvey Specter where he says that I'm not against emotions. I'm against having them, not using them. Right. And I started using that. I was like, hey, you know what? So for the longest time, I didn't realize that I am a very emotional person. Even the fact that I want to repel emotions is coming from a strong belief that the world is against me and everybody has seen me as an inferior personality. And there was like so many emotional burst outs, breakthroughs, which needed to be done for me in order to accept it, right? And when you look at me as a person, I let my family dictate a lot of decisions because I'm so emotionally tied up and sometimes I forget logic. I'd let my close ones dictate emotions. Sometimes in my organization, there are employees who I know that, okay, XYZ, this person, team member, I know that is lying or she's lying or this is the case. But I'm so emotionally attached and I was like, let it be, it's fine. Let it be, it's fine, right? So I'm on this journey. So I felt
some might say, you know what? Here is an individual who is allowing their feelings to decide their decisions and they're doing not badly at all. But my question would be, could Raj do even better?
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
If he was not led by emotions in certain things. I would argue, though, for you to get to where you are, you have been able to understand and manage your emotions better than the average person. There's definitely a case, right? Because I'm also emotional. I'm not saying suppress your emotions. That's not a good strategy. What I'm saying is don't be led by them.
Of course.
Because they do distort our thinking, right? And so
we need to be better managers of our emotions.
Yes. And I know myself, like I know that sometimes I'm speaking to somebody and I might not like them. But instead of not liking them, my second thought is, hang on, why am I not liking them? They haven't done anything to me. This is my own bias playing out. Either they remind me of somebody or I feel like they don't like me, so I'm not liking them. But these are just biases and beliefs in my head. I'm fabricating these thoughts in my head.
Yeah.
I have no evidence of any of this. So I'll question my own dislike for individuals, or I'm uncomfortable around certain people. Why am I uncomfortable around certain people? That's what I'm saying we need to start doing more of, right? So that we can make better decisions. Because a lot of the times we're removing people that are good for us and we're embracing people that are bad for us because we're emotionally led.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we're not thinking straight.
No, I get you. I hear you. And I completely agree with you. And for everyone who got a wrong idea that I'm letting my emotions come out and I'm doing fairly well, I really believe that you should not take away this from me in this conversation, because I believe there's a merit in actually be able to become really, really emotionally intelligent. There's a merit in understanding emotions better. There's a merit in able to feel, understand, observe, and use it for your strength. So I'm on the journey. I'm learning it. Probably during the series of these podcasts, people will see me becoming a more emotionally aware person. Yeah. But I'm not there yet. So I'm learning. So
neither am I. I've just, over a period of time, I've reduced how many decisions I'm making from emotions. Yeah. I still do sometimes. But the critical decisions, I don't. And that's important. And especially decisions about our career. A lot of people are making those decisions from a place of fear and scarcity. That is an emotionally led decision. Yeah. Or what's trending and what's popular at the time, right? So that's, again, you becoming enthused and you're becoming enamored with what's happening. And in those moments, I think there is a high risk of making decisions that are not going to work out very well for you in the long term. Yeah. And to avoid that, I think it's important to have an understanding of emotions, which is a big part of emotional intelligence, which has been conveniently removed from the education system.
Of course. I'll tell you, right? Like, you're talking about my previous success of what I've done. That was also emotionally led. And I want to just give you an example, which I've never shared it. For the longest time, for me, it was just about proving people wrong, right? And in this process, because I became so into myself that, hey, this person doesn't believe in you, let me prove this person. Like, my teacher is like this, I want to prove her wrong. My dad's like this, I want to prove him wrong, right? And over the period of time, I didn't realize that people who are supporting me, I'm against them also. In my own. So for the longest time, I was fighting a battle against my dad in my head, right? Again, my dad in my head. And I was like, okay, I want to show my dad that I can be independent. I can be this, I can be that, I can be all that. My dad's always been there to support me. Like there was never a battle. So I feel that those kind of things, for the longest time, I was coming out of anger, revenge, feeling of inferiority. These are all emotionally led decisions. And that's why I think I've gotten to a certain point. But now there's nothing like that. I feel content with who I am. I really feel I've accepted the way I am. My self-awareness is going high and high and higher every time. And I think now it's time that more than emotions, I want to take my decisions based on imagination, based on values, based on my version of how the good world will look like. Right? So,
that's a great point, and thank you for sharing that, Raj. But I will say something here. If you are going to make decisions from negative emotions, it's better to make them from anger than from fear. Because when you look at, again, the frequency chart, anger requires energy. And anger can produce high performance. It may not produce fulfillment.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
But it can produce high achievement and high productivity. Because I remember before I developed the level of self-awareness that I had, I also had anger. Interestingly, it didn't really affect my ability to achieve and be productive and perform. It didn't. So I saw that the positive side of anger. I did see that as kind of a positive catalyst to high performance anyway. Certainly not great for your nervous system, not great for your health, not great for your relationships, not great for fulfillment. But if you had to operate from any of the low vibrational frequencies, you're better off using anger than guilt, fear, or shame.
Nice.
Those definitely will not allow you to produce and perform and achieve.
I want to touch the money part because I think that we didn't touch at all. I want to know your quick rules of money. Tell me top 3 rules of money if people want to become really successful or financially independent, or they want to be wealthy. Let's just talk about rules of wealth, if that's a better word to say.
Okay, well, let's talk about the money psychology first. I mean, I think it is important that you place some value on wealth.
Okay.
Now, placing value on income is not the same as placing value on wealth. I will just make that distinction right now. Just because you want a higher income doesn't mean you value wealth. It actually means that you may value spending. So a lot of people want the income, not because they want wealth. It's because they want spending. So that's not the same thing. So you actually have to value wealth, which basically means you like the idea of your nest egg growing. Majority of people who want more income don't place value on wealth. So I want to make that distinction very clear. You have to place a value on the building of an asset base. That is important. If you don't, you are not going to take the actions that are necessary to build an asset base, even if you have high income. I'm not convinced that there is necessarily a positive correlation between high income and high wealth. I think it's very plausible to be on a high income and still have very low wealth. And I have seen many examples of that. So that's the first thing. You actually have to tangibly place value on wealth creation. Secondly, you've got to eliminate all negative associations with wealth. Stop saying wealthy people are greedy and corrupt. There are poor people that are corrupt and there are wealthy people that are corrupt. Corruption, greed, exploitation is more a manifestation of character than it is a manifestation of money. Let's not attach it automatically to money. So we see a rich person being bad, we automatically assume that the badness is coming from wealth. It could be coming from a lot of different things, but it's the way we think. So you have to start to proactively look and seek examples of wealthy people doing great things, and start to see how wealth is a positive catalyst for contribution as well as having choices. Third, understand that the best measure of financial wealth is actually net worth. It is not income. It is not profit. It is not revenue. It is not cash flow. It is net worth. I can have a business that produces this much revenue. Somebody can have a business that produces this much revenue. But at the end of the day, if I have a higher net worth than them, I am doing better in the money game. And it's very plausible. You see a lot of people with massive revenues in their business, but if they don't have the net worth, they don't have choices. They always have to work for money. So revenue, income, those things are fine, but ultimate measure of financial success is net worth. So keep an eye on that. And that's one of the things I was saying to you, people don't even know what to look for. what to aim for.
Tell me, what is net worth? Let's just tell everybody.
Well, net worth is basically what you've kept and what is growing, right? I can make all this money, but have I got anything to show for it? And that requires a number of strategies. You want to make sure that you're putting something aside. You want to make sure that that money is growing. You want to make sure that that money is protected. You want to make sure that you're using as many leverage strategies to multiply that money as rapidly as possible. You don't want to speculate. There's a number of things there. So you really want to keep an eye on net worth. At the end of the day, if you made all this money your entire lifetime, and then by the time the game is over, you've got nothing to show for it, have you really done well financially? So you really got to keep an eye on net worth. And that's like, to me, this is such elementary knowledge. And this is why one of the reasons why I'm astonished that the education system doesn't even teach us to aim for it.
There's a new guy in the town, just everybody, he's becoming the poster boy for men around the world and toughen up, Andrew Tate. What's your view on him?
There are many things that he says that I agree with. I was actually saying it a long time ago, but it's not where I wanted to be positioned. But I do agree with a lot of what he says. It just depends on which part you're referring to. Again, he's become a controversial figure. Again, he's just another example of a person who is speaking things that people wouldn't dare speak. And I think, again, before we get emotional about what he's saying, we really need to objectively assess it. I definitely think that there is some facts in what he's saying. But it just depends. He says a lot of things about a lot of things. But I do feel that, if you're looking in the Western world, the feminism movement is big. What has it resulted in? Has it really resulted in better new families? Has it resulted in better birth rate, reduced divorce rate? Has it resulted in more financial independence? Has it resulted in women being happy and fulfilled? I'm not convinced that it did what women thought it would do. And so I have views on it. I'm not a traditionalist in any way. I've grown up in a feminist society. But lately, as I'm getting older and I'm looking and I'm objectively assessing the impact of the feminism movement, some of my views are becoming a little bit more traditional now. And I'm starting to see the merits in that traditional family unit, where men serve different functions and women serve different functions. And I know just saying this will risk me being labeled as a misogynist. But it's not about that. It's not saying that men and women are not equal. It's about saying that men and women are not the same. And because of that, we do things differently, and we're meant to carry out different functions. And when that comes together, I think society has a higher chance of thriving. There is a case to say that in many Western countries, the birth rate is declining, because a lot of the chemistry and attraction between the genders happens through that polarity. And so if you remove that polarity where men are becoming more like women and women are becoming more like men, the attraction automatically diminishes. Diminished physical attraction between the genders automatically results in a declining birth rate. A declining birth rate makes a nation weak. So there is, I know this is a very simplistic explanation and you can dive deep into it, but there is something here that would suggest that, the feminist movement definitely has some issues. And I don't know when it went from being pro-women to anti-men. And that's another issue in itself. It's like pendulum was probably needed to go this way, but it's gone so far this way now that all of a sudden it's gone from being pro-women to anti-men. And I don't know when that happened. And it's like, that's dangerous, because now you're making men feel like we need to be feminine and we can't even serve our primitive nature of being men and our instincts of building and conquering and advancing and protecting and defending, because now you're making us feel like we're aggressive, right? So there is that case as well. And it's about, obviously you want to be a civilized and emotionally intelligent human being and a man, but at the same time you have to be very careful not to give up your masculinity, because that's what makes you a man. And at the same time, it's what makes you attractive to the same women who are criticizing men. So I think it's a very careful balance. It's a very nuanced concept. I certainly would not claim to be an expert on it, but I do have strong views on it.
But do you believe that a lot of, around the world, the movement and everything, okay, I'm not an expert on this, and I believe like men definitely needs to be better feelers Men need to learn how to feel better, because I've been surrounded by women and strong women around my life. My mother, my sister, my aunts, like everybody's like that. So obviously not an expert. I don't understand the feminism movement as of yet because I've not studied it enough. So not an opinion, it's just a question, right? I was recently traveling and I met a couple of people there, and somebody asked me a very interesting question. I want to ask you that as well. Do you believe that the modern media is somewhat trying to make men think that they should not be the way they are right now? Or they're trying to make them weak, or they're trying to make them sensitive, or they're trying to make them, I don't know, whatever the word is. Somebody asked me this question. Like,
feminizing men.
Feminizing men, let's just talk about that.
I would say yes.
The modern media is doing that?
100%.
But what's the harm in that?
Well,
I'm just questioning beliefs. Yeah.
Great question. What's the harm in men being more feminine? I think we need to ask women, first of all, do they want more feminine men? They may like them, but how do they respond to them? That's the first thing. Second thing, if a building's burning, right, and there is people stuck in there, would we expect women to run in there to rescue? We wouldn't. We would expect men to run in there and risk their lives. That's the expectation that society has. The expectation is that women should run out screaming, and nobody's going to say that you're a coward, because that's the true feminine. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Run, preserve themselves and their families. But if a man does that, he's going to be ridiculed. There's an expectation that he should have gone in rather than run out. By default, there is an expectation on men, and I think it's a rightful expectation, that we have to act with honor. We can't just be about self-preservation. We have to build. We have to think intergenerationally. We've got to think about long-term. That requires risk. That requires a level of aggression. Do you really expect that feminine men who don't believe in these concepts of honor and masculinity and protecting and defending and creating and building are going to run into that building? I don't believe they will. And that's the problem. Now imagine your country is being invaded, or your house is being invaded. Do you really want a bunch of women to come and fight off the offenders? Or would you want the most masculine, rugged, dangerous men to defend you? You see, there's a saying that, good people can sleep comfortably in their beds because a lot of bad people out there are protecting their freedoms. There is a case for aggression. It has to be controlled aggression. I think what we had, the masculine man of the 60s and 70s, is not the answer either, because they were low on emotional intelligence. But what we perceived that was that let's give up all the masculinity to fix those men. That's not the solution.
Yeah.
The solution is let's maintain those positive elements of masculinity and complement them with spiritual awareness and emotional intelligence, but not to give them up. I'm a man. I'm proud of being a man. I behave like a man. I think like a man. And I will never change that for anybody. And I have zero shame in it. And if society tries to make me feel like I'm aggressive for it, I'm rejecting that message. Because I know my daughter, my wife, the women in my life expect me to be a man, stand up, protect, and defend when the time comes. And I need to fulfill my responsibility. Men think differently. That's a fact. And we can also logically say it doesn't work, but we also have to be mindful of biology. Biology doesn't care about logic or intellect. Biology is biology. What women may want and what they respond to physically sometimes are not the same things. And so even from an attraction point of view, women need a man that they look up as a leader. I'm not saying that the man should control her and suppress her and dominate her, but they do want a man who is dominant about his career aspirations, right? So there is a case to say that there is some level of dominance that is good. I mean, at the end of the day, you can get too domesticated, and that's a risk to a man. As a man who has been brought up in a very civilized society, a very well-functioning society, a society that has rules for everything, how do I maintain some of my wild instincts? Right? You don't go to the zoo to see a dog. You go to the zoo and line up to see the most dangerous animal, because it fascinates you, it intrigues you at what it can do. And I think I love the words of Jordan Peterson. He said, a good man is a strong man who has the capacity for violence but chooses not to use it, rather than a man who hasn't got the capacity to violence, because then he's just weak. So we want to make sure that we can maintain that level of aggression and that level of dominance drive, but we use it sparingly and appropriately as and when it's needed, and not to use it on people who need our support, and not to inflict that upon people that may be physically or mentally and emotionally weaker than us. That's the critical point that we forgot to tell the men. And I think the narrative is completely distorted now. So I do feel that culture and media are working collectively to feminize men. I don't think it's good for men. I certainly don't think it's good for women.
Interesting. Because I believe in this, that I think as a man, you should understand women in your life. You should understand the feminine energy. You should embrace that, but not lose your masculinity as well, right? A lot of this, the conversation, as you rightly said, it's gotten to the extreme. Like, be masculine, but don't be toxic. Like, don't get into toxic masculinity, right? Because that's bad. Like, be super masculine, be happy. I am a man, I believe in this. I have certain traits of aggression and everything of that sort. But at the same time, I am self-aware enough about the other gender in my life, and I feel what they're feeling. I understand what they're understanding. I try to understand them and try to understand their logics and where they're coming from and their comfort zone as well. So I think every man needs to learn that as well. So it's a balance. We don't need to be feminine, but we don't need to be extremely toxic as a man as well, because the whole conversation is going on like on a two different notes on a lot of media as well.
And look, there's toxic femininity as well. There is that version as well. And we have to be careful, though, not to label strong men and assertive men as toxic. We have to be careful, right?
For sure. Strong men means very different than toxic masculine.
Correct. Society
I believe
needs
everybody
strong
should strive to become strong men.
Yes.
Everybody
and society
should do
needs
that.
them.
Yeah.
Look, I believe that the spiritual order was, you have God. Men were supposed to submit their authority to God. That's how you gain wisdom and you gain compassion and you gain courage. If a man submits his authority to God, that means he's a wise leader, he's a compassionate leader. There was an expectation that women would then submit their authority to the man, and then children would submit their authority to the women. That was the social order for most of humanity. And we tampered with it. And we thought the social order is outdated, and so we should start to tamper with it. And now we have women living with cats and dogs, and the cat is the child and the ultimate authority, and then comes the woman, and there is no man, and there's no God. And we get to see the implications of this messing with this particular order. The issue also happened in some cultures where women were exploited because women were expected to give up their authority for men who had not given up their authority for God. That created an issue, because a man who hasn't got a sovereign moral authority to look up to then becomes God himself. And the problem with that is that man is very likely to use that to exploit others. So we placed expectations in certain cultures and societies that women should submit their authority to men, but we didn't place the obligation for men to become wise and spiritual and bold and all the qualities that are synonymous with being spiritual. So that was unfair. And so then the feminist movement was in response to that. But we fixed it the wrong way. What we should have done is to place the obligation on men to, hey, you get your act together. You need to be more responsible. You need to look after the family. You need to stop watching porn. You need to stop watching sports. You need to get your financial house in order. You need to build. That's your duty. We didn't do that. We attacked the women for wanting to submit to. So I understand why women got so upset. And women was like, I've had enough. I need my independence. Reality is, most women would much rather be in the security and comfort of a man who protects her. But they don't have a choice anymore because men were not trained properly.
I mean, that sums up all my questions, and I'm glad that we could do that. It was like a good conversation. That was great.
Raj, I can see why you are a very successful man. And
I'm
well
not
done
yet.
to you.
I'm learning.
Oh, no, you are
figuring out. Thank you for watching this episode till the end. Please let us know in the comments what were the things that you liked, what were the things that you didn't like. And if you want us to continue these kind of episodes, which are very heavy on mental models, on debates of how the world works and how it can make you and me better, and how it can train us to achieve our Indian dream faster. Before you log out, please remember to share this episode with at least one person, because one episode can spark so many ideas, and out of all those ideas, just one idea is enough to help you, to help me, or to help people around us achieve their Indian dream. Until the next episode, keep figuring out.